Yeah, I thought that was really interesting too because I remember one time I think OIA had a workshop with IO, with the International Student Organization (ISO), and we were talking about like direct and indirect conflicts and stuff like that. And there was one time where Candace, being the actor that she is,
I was there for that.
Yeah,
one.
you saw it too, right? She was acting out a scene, I think, in a room with her roommate Adrian, and they were she was talking about how Adrian was being noisy, but she was being indirect. So she was trying to say, oh, I'm having trouble getting some sleep and stuff like that. And then the outgoing Adrian, who's an extrovert, who needs direct interaction, just says, oh, well, turn off your music or something like that. And it kind of got roundabout. Then is just basically just showing people to, there's some conflict between direct and indirect people and how to discuss with that. So I thought that was really interesting too. It's like some personalities can be direct or indirect, depending and stuff.
I remember in my first year, I lived in a double room with another Canadian, and while I was walking back to my dorm, she texted me and saying, oh, Shannon, where are you? Like, are you heading home? I was like, oh, she's so nice. And I was like, I'm coming. And then it's like, what about you? And she's just, next message, she texted me, it's like, oh, where is your kettle? I was like, oh, is she asking me to borrow my kettle to her or something else? I was like, this is so rude. She's saying so directly through her text. And then at that instance, I just can't think about the cultural and personality piece that makes her say that very directly to me. And then I'm just so mad. And then I just decided not to go back to my room and just go off for lunch and then head back later. So she's like, I know she's a very direct person because I know her already for a couple months. But at that instant, because things just happen so fast and I didn't got it. Just, this is so rude. No, I'm not going back. I'm not letting her to use my kettle. And it's like,
no kettle for you.
Yes. But yeah, when I think about it after, then it's like, oh, it's normal for her to ask that question so directly because she's also the smallest in her family, so maybe that plays a role as well.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Oh. Well, I thought that's cool because I never really thought about how you can also accidentally perceive text as also having personality as well.
Yes, because you can't really tell from their tone. It's just words that you receive. So maybe just a little bit conflict through only words.
Some conflict. So what are some ways you guys think that you can resolve issues for people with different personalities? So I guess this is more of a broad topic, not just culture, but people with different personalities. How do you think that they can resolve issues? Like, for example, the direct and indirect.
Yeah, what I did was just I had to face the fact that I have to gather the courage to go up to them and tell them that, you know what, I don't want you to play music at 3 a.m. So yeah, I think, but I realized that after a year of being here, and I was like, if I don't do this, there's no way I can sleep peacefully at night. So one day I just went to him and I'm like, you know what, can you not play music too late in the night because I have early lectures? And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And after that night, he turned it off way before midnight, and I'm fine till midnight because I'm like I'm a night person, so I stay up till late. And he, just because I told him, he turned down the music way before I actually asked him to, and I was like, oh, that's really sweet of him. But I didn't realize that would happen until I actually went to him and told him to turn the music off. So yeah, I think that's one thing that people can try, is just to I know it'll be uncomfortable in the beginning just to go up to someone and tell them something, but yeah, I think that's one thing that people should try.
Yeah, just try to be assertive.
Yeah.
Don't just say turn the music off. But just we can just talk to them like you normally would, I guess, as friends.
I think it's important to also, like I said, just familiarize yourself with the other culture and kind of understand or think about why they might be acting that way. So in terms of the dishes incident, it was at first just really annoying, but then when you think about it, this is their culture and this is what they believe and this is how they're brought up. And although this is just one little insignificant incident that happened, I think that it goes to show like it's a learning experience, and that when you try to have some sort of mutual understanding, and so she understands that in our culture we like to rinse the soap off the dishes, generally speaking, I would say. And so I think it's just based on an understanding and a willingness to interact with the others as well, because if you're not willing to do that, then that could probably cause some bigger issues, I'd say.
It's good to in practice to learn about new cultures.
Another incident is we were like sitting, me and my friends, we were sitting in a restaurant, and waiters generally over here are very chatty, and they come up to you and they ask you how your day was, and just generally very bright and talkative. So in India, there's no concept of small talk. Basically, we just keep to ourselves. We don't mean bad, but we're not very we're not very open, so we don't talk to everyone. So one of my friends, she was sitting there, and the waiter was just like asking us what we wanted, and we hadn't really decided. So what she meant to tell the waiter was, just like, if you could please come back after 5 minutes, we haven't decided. And she's like, all she said was, yeah, we'll tell you, like, we'll let you know. Which was perceived as cold, and the waiter was like, okay, why is she talking like this? But because we knew that she didn't mean it, we understood what she meant. And after the waiter went away, we told her, you know what, why are you saying it like this? Like, just tell him, okay, like, could you give us a minute or something? So yeah, I think the way people perceive other cultures or other personalities is very different. Like, we knew what she meant. We knew why she's saying like this, because that's how they do back in our country. Like, we're not necessarily like sweet or like not like, chatty with people, but straightforward. So the waiter felt bad, but I hope the tip really like, made up for that.
I think it's also important for you to keep calm when the incidents happen, because if you don't, it's like when you get really mad, you forget anything that's associated with culture difference or a personality thing, and then you start mumbling and raging towards that person, and then end up making things really worse. So I think it's really important to breathe, take a moment, or walk away when it happens.
A moment of reflection is good too, because you know, this is if you're in a new culture, or if you're exposed to a new culture, you can't really know what they're thinking of or what their intentions are, but you're interpreting it in your own, based on your own culture. So like, you know, as much as your culture is very straightforward, Tirth, and so if you know, as that's normal in your culture, so that's perfectly fine. But like when you go into when someone else applies their culture onto what your personality is like, then that's where the awkwardness comes from.
That's true.
So yeah, it's good to take a step back and remember, it's a web.
It's like you might not agree with them, but you can respect them. Like you can respect the culture even if you don't agree with it.
Yeah, it's different. You gotta open your mind a little bit. Okay, so do you think that conflict and cultural personalities are only between people, as we've discussed with students, or with just between one person and one person, or can conflicts in personality also be between nations? So this, I guess, would be a bit more political. So, I think, how would you guys go about this? Like, if you were at a UN conference and we were talking, and so would there be differences in conflict or in personality when we're talking between people from different nations, different nationalities, officials?
I would say yes, can definitely be conflicts between nations, and between people from different nations, although my knowledge of politics is not very vast. But I can say, using the example of Spain, as we know, they are in a severe economic crisis right now. And this might be more of like our viewpoint on the Spanish people and their personality. So maybe this is going back to the stereotyping, but we wonder, why are they in an economic crisis? And perhaps someone from Spain would be able to explain this, like explain why they're in this economic crisis, but we might look at them and say, well, maybe they're spending too much time having a siesta. And maybe they should start like looking for more jobs, and maybe like this is an internal problem. So I don't know. I think, going back to the question, I think that yes, you can definitely have conflicts between nations and misunderstandings between different cultures. But in terms of, I can't really think of any other examples.
I think it's the same because nations is just a bigger group of people interact with another bigger group of people. So I think the basis is really similar to between two people from different culture interacting. So definitely there would be conflict for sure.
I fear that, going back to your comment on stereotyping, Caroline, I think that when you go expand everything into like just nations, with nations talking about different nations, I think that the problem of stereotyping becomes a bigger deal.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because I think that when you're talking about, like, if you're on, I don't know, TV or on the internet forums and stuff like that, when you're talking about people from other nations, it tends to be a lot more generalized, because that's where I guess stereotyping comes from, because that's when you start talking about like people from a different country are in general like this, so that's where you get into the stereotypes. Individually, I think that wouldn't be much of a problem. So, I know that Vietnamese people aren't always very serious, and I know like there are some rude Canadians out there. So that's not always all the stereotypes, but I think that when you consider everyone as a nation, that's when you start falling into the
Categories of stereotyping.
Stereotyping, just to make things easier, even though the person you're talking to from a certain nation isn't always like that. So you always assume things. So yeah, I guess there might be conflict in that sense, especially if the stereotypes are so in contrast with each other. Yeah. So
I think stereotyping is a huge thing that we are grown up with, because it's kind of associated with the thing that we learn from, like, for example, schools. That kind of thing, we get knowledge from different stereotyping for different nations. So we kind of just take it as granted and believe in it and never really think about it. Oh, there's other people that doesn't necessarily follow the stereotyping that we learn about from. So we have to.
And it might be hard to get further experience, like knowing that nation, if you don't know people from there, or if you don't have experience like traveling there or something like that, because all you have to go off of it might be that stereotype.
So you don't have anything to prove that it's wrong. So you just kind of stick with what you have already.
Yeah. But once you go out and expand into when you start traveling or exposing yourself to different cultures, even in your own local communities too, there's probably different cultural communities in your own city and stuff like that. So if you just expand and are willing to, meet new people and stuff like that, I'm pretty sure that they can probably prove you wrong or prove you right, depending.
Yeah, I've personally learned not to take stereotypes very seriously or very personally, because I understand how they could be formed, and some of the stereotypes they're not even bad stereotypes. Like I don't mind being stereotyped, like for basically like for Indian food, it's like, oh, it's too spicy.
Oh yeah.
Which it is too spicy. So I know why the stereotype is formed. So I've basically learned not to take everything personally, because it might not even apply to me most of the time. So yeah, I just accept that, okay, it is there, and I make my effort to make the other people realize how it's not true for most cases, but I don't try too hard, because if it's not harming anyone significantly, then I shouldn't be that much of an issue.
So like if it's not a negative stereotype.
Yeah, if it's not a negative stereotype, and if it's not like they're not using it in a negative way, then I would be fine with it.
Yeah. What do you guys think about that? Do you find that when people stereotype you, do you think that how do you react?
I remember in high school in Canada, I remember people saying, "Oh, you're Asian, so you must be good at math."
Oh, that happened to me.
Yes, that happened to me too.
No, that's not true. And then I just don't want to prove it, because that's not good to prove for sure. And I just want to, I don't know, I just kind of work with them, and they understand that, oh, maybe you're not, maybe not as good as I thought. But some stereotype for sure, you can change it with maybe your act or your, I don't know, what's the word to say it, but you definitely can change the stereotyping that people put on you and labels as well.
I think for me, being a Canadian and living in Canada, I'm not exposed to that as often, but when I was living in Spain, in terms of dealing with the stereotype, I would have to disagree with what you just said, Shannon. I found it very, very hard to get out of the negative stereotypes of Americans because a lot of Europeans and much of the world sees Canada as being part of America or the United States of America, and sometimes they don't realize that these are separate places. And so even if you're just riding the bus and people kind of stare at you, and not a nice stare, it's weird how a stare can have emotion behind it. But I would say sometimes it was hard to evade that stereotype of the rowdy, obnoxious American. And often people will treat you differently, and you can't just get out of it so easily. Sometimes in areas you can say, oh, I'm Canadian, and they'll treat you way, way better.
Definitely.
And it's weird. So a lot of the backpackers like to put a Canadian flag on the back of their backpacks. And even I knew some Americans who put Canadian flags on the back of their backpacks because they wanted to ride off of our stereotype, which is a positive one, generally speaking. So, but it is hard to escape the stereotype, I think, a lot of the time, especially if you don't know someone for very long.
I think that's really interesting too, because my experience with stereotyping, it wasn't really negative, but it was just something where like if people brought it up enough that it just got tedious. The whole Asians being smart and stuff like that. As much as it's not a bad stereotype, it's the expectation for you to do well is still there. So I'm in English. That's an art. I'm in arts English. So that is way beyond the expectation that most people thought that I would be. So I was good at math. Not anymore. I did well in school and everything, but I really liked the arts more than I liked science and math and stuff like that. Which, when I told my friends about that, who always made a joke about stereotyping me, they were like, "Oh yeah, but you're Asian, so you gotta be good at math, so you gotta go into the sciences and stuff like that." I'm just like, well, I don't like it as much. I like to write and do essays and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, another thing that most Indian international students face is when you get here and when you talk to people and you tell them that you're an Indian from India, they're like, "Oh, you speak such good English." And we're like, you know what? We are native English speakers, so we're supposed to speak good English, and we are taught it as a first language in school. So I don't know why people don't realize that it is a very big deal. Like, our first language in schools is English.
Really?
So it's really surprising for them when we come here and they hear us talking in English, and they're like, "Oh, but you speak such good English." And I'm like, "Yeah, thanks. I'm supposed to speak good English." So yeah, that's one of the stereotypes which every Indian student, like, I've spoken to a lot of them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we've been asked the same thing." So,
Really? Oh, wow, I did not know that.
it's okay. I felt bad at first that oh, this is what they think, but actually it's really amusing. Like, yeah, I like to correct them in these situations. So yeah, it's nice. Yeah, maybe we had an accent. I'm sure we had an accent, but yeah, we knew the words.
Okay, so thank you guys, Caroline, Shannon, and Tirth, for coming in and talking to us about culture and personality. And thank you, everyone, for listening in to Radio Culturale. And I hope you guys will listen in for another show.